At T-Mobile, our critical mission is providing unparalleled 5G coverage for when connectivity is mission critical. Introducing T-Priority, America's best 5G network experience for first responders, even in times of congestion. More capacity, faster speeds, better coverage. T-Priority from T-Mobile, built for tomorrow's emergencies, ready today. Discover more at t-priority.com.
For qualifying organizations on eligible rate plans, coverage not available in some areas and may be impacted by emergencies.
I didn't see anything opening day or Sunday.
Yeah, but that's the way it is sometimes.
No.
It's got to put the time in.
Welcome back to the Kitchen Conversations. At the Foul Weather Podcast, we truly believe that the kitchen is the perfect place for sharing information, spending time with family and friends, and genuinely BSing about life, ducks, the science of duck migration, duck conservation, and duck hunting itself. At either home or camp, the kitchen is a place to celebrate the day and come together to learn from each other. But also, it's also a place to simply enjoy life. The Foul Weather Podcast aims to use the Kitchen Conversations as a way to bring duck science with duck science people directly to you in raw form. But we also aim to simply talk with duck people across duck country as well. Very often you're going to notice that duck science people are also duck people from across duck country, right? Think about that for a second. Most of the people that work very hard to conserve duck habitat and ducks are also duck hunters from across duck country, USA. In this episode, we meet with John Simpson, Executive Director of the Winous Point Shooting Club and Winous Point Marsh Conservancy in the duck cleaning or plucking room. Towards the end, we continue our discussion as part of our In the Marsh Series with some good shooting, a quick chat about flooded corn, and a nice flight of gadwall for some sporty shooting. Thanks for joining us for another episode of the Kitchen Conversations. And as always, may your skies be filled and shoot straight, my friends.
Tomorrow will be 16, and then we close down for just a 5-day break, Monday through Friday, and then it reopens the following Saturday. So we're back at it for the balance of the season.
Yeah, how many days are you? So out of those 16, have you had folks here shooting every day?
Oh yeah,
really.
Except for the middle Sunday, we were closed for the middle Sunday for our rest day. But we
for the birds or for you or
for
both?
the birds. So our club closes for the birds, and we don't shoot on Thursday afternoons either. So other than that, though, open all the way through. So we had, I didn't sit down and look at the guns, but we probably had 120 hunters through in the first 2 weeks of season, something like that.
That's awesome. That's awesome. You know, in my family, and maybe John's, and I know happens here at Winous Point Shooting Club, is a lot of the good, cocktails and good food and family and friends all kind of happens in the kitchen. So we kind of settled on a little less formal kind of portion of the podcast called the Kitchen Conversations. We're at Winous Point Marsh Conservancy with John Simpson. He's the executive director. And John, I'm going to let you detail our relationship, right, a little bit over the years as friends and research partners. And maybe I'm going to let you say maybe when we met, because I don't know if it's all going to be fuzzy anyway, because we've had a long relationship as folks doing duck research. But do you recall when those first years many moons ago were?
So I'm trying to remember when we first met, because you were putting me on the spot there just a second ago. I can't quite remember. I think it was probably at one of the Great Lakes Partners Forums, wasn't it?
Yeah.
When maybe one that Petrie organized up at Long Point would have been the first time we crossed paths.
Yeah, I think that's when it was. I can't remember. I just remember having a lot in common with you. Just the questions we wanted to ask about kind of ducks, duck movement, wetland management. All those things that you guys are doing here that we were doing at Long Point. So, and
then certainly at one of the North American Duck Symposiums, I know we were there together probably several times.
Yeah, so John just mentioned the North American Duck Symposium. That's coming up again this February in Portland, Oregon. no offense, but of all places, because we have to fly halfway across the planet to go to it. But that's there is actually an entire meeting of all the folks who do duck research and manage waterfowl and are involved in waterfowl conservation. I'd say it's usually like 300 to 400 people or so attend. It's usually once every 3 years. Post-COVID, we're doing, I think this is year 4 now. We're a little out on that one. But we would definitely have met and chatted there. But I think the way we got close was working together to put these kind of Great Lakes waterfowl wetland symposiums together, which was mostly a venue to share information across from Ontario, where we were working with folks in the States, mostly across like Lake Erie, Lake Ontario, and Lake St. Clair. But a lot of it was for the students that we all work with too, right? So I think that was kind of the impetus for it, is the information sharing, but also giving students a really nice venue to do this stuff. So that kind of fell apart a little bit, but you brought it back last summer. Two summers ago.
That was definitely the first time you and I put our heads together to work on a project, for sure, was organizing that. I don't know how many we've had now. I think 4 here. And it kind of fell apart and COVID delayed things, and we got it back together last summer. Was the first time we had that. And like you said, it's really, at least from my perspective, it's really about getting all the current graduate students together to meet each other, share knowledge, bounce ideas off each other, and kind of foster those early relationships, the kind of relationships that you and I and our colleagues have had 20 years ago that we rely on today when we're doing our research.
Yeah, I remember cracking a lot of beers with Scott Petrie and Dave Ankney over the years in cottages at Long Point, after hunts and such. And those are kind of like brainstorming events to think about, what makes the marsh tick, and how do we keep ducks at high numbers, and how do we keep hunters happy? I mean, it's where a lot of my research comes from. But I really want to touch on one thing, because I bet listeners are kind of thinking we're mixing modes, because I'm saying, Winous Point Shooting Club. First of all, I get is it Winous or is it Winous? Is there a preference? Is there a correct way to pronounce it?
So the current correct pronunciation would be Winous. That's what the staff and the membership and everyone associated with the club calls it, or the club and the Conservancy calls it. The historic correct pronunciation is probably Winous, and that's a Native American name, and it is derived from or related to winnow, which is winnowing the chaff out of wild rice. And so Native Americans would have came to where we're sitting today to winnow their wild rice after they harvested it in the marshes.
And I was out there last 2 days, as a guest here, to shoot. And is there a stick of wild rice left out there?
No, it's been a long time since there's been any wild rice here, probably 150 years.
Oh.
And that, changing hydrology, changing water quality, just changing environmental factors in general has eliminated that. It probably never was a really big stronghold for wild rice, but there certainly was we have historic accounts of it being here, and obviously the name's derived from that.
And it's still on at some places, around Lake Erie, actually. Like Long Point has huge tracts of wild rice that kind of come and go depending upon water levels and such. Yep. And like ringneck ducks are actually considered like one of the bread and butter ducks up there, because they're coming out of places where there's wild rice and lakes to the north. And when they're eating wild rice, they taste great. I shot ringnecks down in Missouri that I think they move on to snails and other things when they go south. And they're fun shooting, but God, they taste like shit. Yeah. But yeah, ringnecks can be good tasting when they're on rice. So that's kind of a big loss, but Great Lakes have gone through tons of changes.
Brief interruption.
So
do you want to go back to the question, or do you just want me to dive into the answer?
That's a good question, dog. We knew this was going to happen. Don't worry.
I might as well let her in, otherwise we'll just listen to barking. Go on, you can lay down.
Bob. So yeah, I asked about, brief interruption there, but asked about the, let me start over. So we covered up, it is, we'll go back to the question at hand. We covered that it is actually Winous Point Shooting Club nowadays. But we also, so that's the hunt club portion. We also talked about the research, and so folks are like, well, I thought you meant, a shooting club. So just talk about maybe briefly the shooting club, and then how there's actually the Winous Point Marsh Conservancy that was created after the shooting club.
Yep.
But how those two are intertwined here at Winous.
Yeah, for sure. So I have two intertwined positions out here, and I wear two hats. Some days two hats, some days different hats, depending on what I'm working on. But the Winous Point Shooting Club is a historic duck hunting club, probably, or at least as far as I know, the oldest duck hunting club in North America. So the Shooting Club was incorporated in 1856 by wealthy businessmen from Cleveland area, and then some local hunters, wealthy businessmen from Norwalk and Sandusky. They incorporated the club and I guess purchased the land and officially started a duck hunting club here in 1856.
So let me, and I won't do this much because I like the story, but there's a few really cool things I always tell people, and I might bastardize them because I remember things differently than when people tell me. But I remember you giving a tour with students here one time and other colleagues and saying that the original members took a paddle boat from Cleveland to Winous Point because they used to just camp on the point at first because the road from Cleveland to Winous was too dangerous or too difficult? Too difficult.
There really wasn't an established road. Like from Cleveland to Detroit, there basically wasn't a road along this part. There was some wagon trails. It's all part of the Great Black Swamp, so it was really swampy and difficult to navigate, in those days with horse and buggy. So what they would do is travel from Cleveland to the town of Lorain, which is along the lakeshore about halfway between here and Cleveland, and then they'd get on a old style paddle wheel steamboat and bring it all the way up the coast of Lake Erie and into Sandusky Bay, and then pull up to our docks, our big cement docks here, and then stay for a week or two to hunt when they came to hunt in the very early days.
Yeah, that's really cool. How long is there records of how long that went on?
So we know they were coming here in the early 1840s for sure. We have written records and accounts of that. Before there was actually an incorporated club, but they had an association, and they were traveling up here back then. So they incorporated the club, purchased the property, built a clubhouse in 1856. And so we've had hunters and healthy membership ever since then. We still have 28 members of the shooting club today. But those early members had a strong interest in conservation and natural history, at least, what that meant back then, which was shooting a lot of things, mounting a lot of things, study skins, specimens, preserving things. And we had one member in particular who was doing a lot of work on waterfowl of the region and breeding waterfowl of the region and their preferred foods and their breeding habitats. And he published basically a guidebook to the breeding waterfowl of Winous Point in the mid 1800s, which is really cool to go back and read.
That's amazing, and it makes me think about, and I did a little comment on the Roosevelt Wildlife Station at ESF, and Teddy Roosevelt was obviously a huge figure in America, but also just a huge figure for conservation and hunters in general. But a lot of people don't know this, but these two things are intertwined. What you're saying in this story is that Teddy Roosevelt published a research paper when he was a teenager from traveling around the Saranac Lake Paul Smith's area, the St. Regis Canoe area, and it was the summer breeding birds of the St. Regis region of the Adirondacks, right? And so this is somebody that was a hardcore hunter and conservationist that was also, the term we use is dicky birder, they're passerines and stuff. But it sounds like the folks in your membership as well, albeit very heavy into hunting, were also just extremely interested in kind of the natural history of the region and preserving that, recording it and preserving it, which kind of leads over a long-term period to the Marsh Conservancy. But I want you to tell me about the archites, because I think that's some of the coolest thing. And here's another one that I think I might have bastardized. I'm going to let you talk about it and then see if I remember something about Kirtland's warbler correctly.
Yep.
And we'll see. So go.
That's where I was just going.
Were
You
you?
had me thinking about it the whole time there.
I think we've had too many of these conversations.
Yeah,
John.
for sure. So yes, our early membership, they were very much interested in natural history, and not just here at Winous Point, but also across northern Ohio. And they were all from Cleveland, and in Cleveland they had a little club or an association. It was basically a natural history club, for lack of a better way to describe it. They had a clubhouse. They would make a lot of collections of freshwater mussels, study skins of birds in particular, pressed plants, all that sort of natural history collection and description type stuff. They stored that all in their clubhouse. So their clubhouse was full of mounts and study skins, and so the clubhouse became nicknamed the Ark because it had two of everything, and so their club was then called the Archites Society, and one of the members, a lot of our club members were members of the Archites, but there was other members that didn't hunt here too, and Dr. Jared Kirtland was one of them, who was probably the biggest naturalist of the club, and he's, his namesake is the Kirtland's warbler today.
So he probably physically shot that bird, because that's what you used to do in the day, and then ID'd it as a brand new warbler species which had never been identified on the planet. That occurs primarily now in, I should know this, I teach ornithology for goodness sakes, but it's upper Michigan, but does it extend anywhere? I'm not sure it extends much
I think
elsewhere. Other than
I
that.
could be wrong. I think there's a small population in Wisconsin too.
Yeah, it relies on what jack pine, which jack pine forests aren't favored for timber, so there's not a lot of it anymore. But
so the
so here's where I got that wrong. I thought that Kirtland was actually a member, but he was a member of the Archites.
Yeah, he was a member of the Archites Society.
So the goal of the Archites really was wasn't the idea like shoot a male and female of every single species and get it into, didn't they found like the Cleveland Museum of Natural History too?
So yeah, I don't know if they had a specific goal other than just a deep interest in natural history, investigations of the day. They corresponded with John James Audubon. They published a lot of their own works. They didn't just work just in Ohio. They traveled and did collections and descriptions elsewhere. Brought a lot of it back to the Archites, and then over time that Archites Society just evolved and became the Cleveland Museum of Natural History. And you can go to the Cleveland now and down into the basement of the Museum of Natural History, and you can go through the study skins and see all the names that I'm talking about. See all of our early members here all have skins in there that they described. I suspect, for all I know, I'm sure Kirtland's warbler is probably in the basement of the Museum of Natural History in Cleveland.
I now have a mission.
Yeah.
Is to see that animal.
Yep.
That's really cool. Like this is what's fun, is because I've gone through and done the tours with you, but never had the straight one-on-one time with you like this to talk about these things. So then maybe expound on how, explain how that mentality carried on through time and evolved into the Marsh Conservancy, and why we're kind of working partners lots of times now.
So I'm going to fast forward through a bunch of history here, but I'll touch on a few nuggets as we move along. But that early interest in natural history and conservation, that sort of mindset of our membership has carried through time, and we still have that today, and it's carried. The shooting club's 175 years old, and we still have that mindset today, and we have all along. So, you mentioned about changes to habitats in the Great Lakes and lower Great Lakes specifically. So there's from the beginning of the shooting club here in 1850s, which was more or less the beginning of European settlement in Northwest Ohio. From there, all the way through to even today, there's been a drastic habitat change, and the members all the way along recognized how our marshes were changing, the species composition, particularly the ducks, but breeding bird species and everything was changing over time. And in the 1950s, the president of the shooting club decided, And it probably stemmed back to some of the fact that duck hunting might not have been that great for a few years. And he said, we need a biologist here to do research on our marshes, do research on our ducks, basically conduct some adaptive feedback type research that we can feed back into our marsh management and make our place better and more attractive to ducks and waterfowl and wildlife.
So this is a lot of, I think, of why a lot of us got into this too, is that, and I feel like, you know, waterfowl management, waterfowl conservation has been at the forefront a lot of this, is that we're in the marshes all the time. You know, the hunters are there, the members are there, the punters are there. They're seeing changes and they start asking questions. But a lot of it comes back to, like, and I'll bring this back to weather since this is the Fall Weather podcast, but like the reason I really got into duck research was honestly because I wanted to find a way to shoot more ducks.
Oh yeah.
And when your ducks go away, it seems like the, you know, the Dust Bowl stuff that happened, that spawned a ton of research at one time when that happened. And then in the 80s when populations got really low, that spawned a lot of interest in getting ducks back. And this sounds like a very similar situation where it's like, hey, the habitat's changed, the ducks aren't here, you know, let's spend some time figuring out what we can do to, you know, the limited ducks that are around, maybe attract them to the place so that we continue to have reasonable shooting.
Yep. What happened here at our local site was water quality coming into this wetland changed dramatically when Northwest Ohio was cleared for agriculture. So the sediment loads and everything increased. Common carp were introduced. Some other invasive species were introduced. We were mostly losing marshland to storms were taking marshland away, washing it out into Lake Erie, and it wasn't being regenerated because it couldn't because of the water quality and the turbidity. So we started diking marshes in, and then there was a need to understand how to manage those diked marshes. And so the president of the shooting club at that time decided we needed a biologist on staff to do this research. And he hired a young guy named John Anderson, who was working for Frank Belrose at the time, Frank was, you know, investigating the early stages of moist soil management and wetland management and all that kind of stuff.
And real quick, for people that don't know, I mean, Frank Belrose to this day is somebody that most of us, when we write a research paper, find a way to cite. And, I mean, I consider him like the grandfather of waterfowl management. I mean, there's other people as well, but Frank ran the biological station. It's now the Belrose Biological Station. It's the Forbes Biological Station, which is Stephen Forbes, who was a famous ecologist, and then Frank was. But there's also like
Frank was the director.
There's a Belrose name in there now somehow, because in you know, in memory of him. But he was the director of that for quite a while. Really famous for his wood duck work as well as moist soil stuff. So that was the early days of habitat management for waterfowl. Really is what it was. The early days of that. So they brought John Anderson here. John started what was known at the time as the Winous Point Research Committee, which was a three-way partnership between Winous Point Shooting Club, Ohio State University, and the Ohio Division of Wildlife. And between the three of them, we started housing graduate students here, conducting graduate research here, and sponsoring the costs of the graduate research, you know, through the three partnership, or the three partners in the partnership. That research program, I mean, just steadily grew over time from 1950 when they started it until 1999. And in 1999, it had just grown so big that the membership of the club at the time decided to incorporate the Winous Point Marsh Conservancy. And so I'm the executive director now of the Winous Point Marsh Conservancy, and it's a 501c3 nonprofit organization that has a three-pronged mission of research, conservation, and education. And so the research program is still super strong. You know, probably 120 graduate students have come through that program since 1950. That's impressive.
Yeah, including myself and quite a few people that work here actually nowadays.
Yeah, and that's what's neat is it's a positive feedback loop, right? To producing those kind of the next generation of professionals, including folks that have stayed on and even worked here to kind of improve this place.
Yeah, for sure. So that's why I kind of said I wear two hats, because the shooting club is still here, still very, very much an important part of what we do, and still drives a lot of our shared mission of research, conservation, and duck hunting. But the Marsh Conservancy owns, operates, manages everything. Outside of the fall, I spend, or over the course of the year, I probably have 75% of my workload is Marsh Conservancy now, and most of our staff. And we have seasonal internships and graduate students and educational programs.
Well, and amazing facilities for these folks to use, including lab space and boats. All your marshes is a living lab as well.
For sure.
So a fantastic place for students to come and work. And we've published, I'm just going to say handful of papers together now, but today we shot some mallards, and they came in and got measured up by a student, Hunter Collins, which is, he's doing a mallard genetic study looking at morphology and stuff. Just a little sidebar here, though, I have to tell you this. When we brought Hunter on, and he started taking different classes with different professors at ESF, I had a professor stop me, and they're like, "Not only do most of your students hunt, and that's their background, of course, and that's why they're into this stuff, and they wear camo to class and everything, but now you literally have students named Hunter that have matriculated with you." So, I'm gonna crack another beer. This is like the intermission before we get into other stuff, I guess. So. You're welcome to as well.
I'll crack mine too then.
No sponsorships yet. No beer sponsorships or anything. But
you need to work on a sponsorship.
Yeah, we'll get there. All right. That's really cool, and I love that structure of hunters that are also involved in providing a place and some funding for students, because the resource that they are taking part in, all these ducks that stop by here, wouldn't be there without that huge voice from biologists over the years as well.
Sure.
So it's just like this positive feedback loop that's super natural.
Yeah, I mean, everyone likes to talk about the hunter conservationist sort of model of North American conservation, and here's a perfect example of, members of our duck hunting club here that are going above and beyond and giving all that extra to fund everything that goes on here throughout the rest of the year too.
Yeah, and I try to teach this to students as well, and I don't think we get it enough. I mean, in the grand scheme of things, and the inequity that does occur in this world financially, that is a thing that does happen. But the folks that have the financial wherewithal to promote these types of things are also out there, right? Like, we derive a lot of our funds from philanthropy. And of course, not all big money flows back to this, but I always say, look, don't look at everybody, as the same. And please understand that there's a lot of folks out there with deep pockets that do a lot of good, and they have the financial wherewithal to kind of help us all. Mm-hmm. And that's what's going on with some of this feedback loop stuff, and it's not just here, it's across the country. There's a lot of that type of stuff that happens that we all benefit from. So I think we could talk wetland management forever.
Yep.
But because we are a weather podcast, I think that, a duck migration podcast, I kind of want to get to what changes kind of have you guys, if any, maybe I shouldn't be presumptuous about this, right? What kind of changes, if any, in kind of duck migration have you seen over the years? You've been here since 2008.
Yeah. So
have there been any? I mean, that's a short period, but have there been changes since then?
Well, sure. Even in the first of all, this is all anecdotal, of course, and sometimes anecdotal information gets you into trouble. But it's a good place to start and develop hypotheses from. But I don't think there's any question, even in the 15 years that I've been here, our final freeze out date, end of summer or end of winter, end end of season, beginning of winter,
Right.
our final freeze up date has been inching backwards. You know, when I started here, it was common to have a hard freeze with an inch or two of ice around Thanksgiving, and then it was fairly common to be done, you know, the marshes completely froze out by mid-December. And the last 2 or 3 winters in particular, we get some, it's just like a freeze-thaw cycle where we never freeze all winter long, and the mallards and black ducks especially they just move back and forth with that ice line, and so they keep coming back all winter. And last winter, we wintered mallards and blacks all winter long here. They never did leave the region for the entire winter, which I've never seen before.
Yeah, and for folks that aren't aware, I think this may come into that area. This might be like Midwest-ish, but you guys were kind of affected by it. Last winter, out of the 126 years that NOAA, I mean, they're kind of like the, atmospheric weather authority. I'm not going to go into, what is that, National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration is what NOAA is. I should know that. They've been keeping records for 126 years, and I think we were 126 of 126. It was the warmest year on record, right? So I'm not going to delve into, climate change and why it's happening or things like that at this time. That's, there's obviously varying opinions on that. But the point is the current trend seems to be, much, much warmer. And we're seeing the same thing in New York. I mean, in central New York around the Finger Lakes region where we're at, we've moved our seasons way back. I mean, we go to almost sometimes the end of the first week of January, depending upon when that Saturday falls or whatever, right?
Yeah.
But what we see are like these big snows. We'll get cold events and big snow, and the birds move to the Finger Lakes, which never freeze, which they can go out.
This episode is brought to you by Prime Video. In the small town of Holland, Michigan, nothing is ever what it seems. Behind the tulip festivals and pretty houses lay dark secrets that threaten to tear a marriage apart. Nicole Kidman stars in this darkly twisted thriller about a wife and mother whose quest to uncover her husband's secrets may get her more than she bargained for. Holland, streaming on Prime Video, March 27th.
Sit in Lake Erie here if they wanted to.
Yep.
And then you'll get like a rain event on top of the snow. You get like a 2-inch rain event on top of 10 inches of snow. And then everything floods, and all the birds do is come back off the lake and just exploit all that newly flooded stuff. It sounds like sometimes your birds actually go south sometimes a little bit, but then just bump right back up with that fluctuation back and forth.
Yeah, for sure. Our band recovery data and our banding analysis, and then we've done a number of satellite transmitter projects for various reasons over the last few years. And that satellite transmitter data really confirmed some of our hunches with mallards and black ducks here in the late season. And they are, I shouldn't say they're local, but they want to winter here or as far north as they can in the Great Lakes. And so when we get freeze events, it pushes them to southern Ohio to the big rivers and to Kentucky to the big rivers and reservoirs. Maybe as far south as Tennessee, but as soon as it thaws, even if it's a week later, they just follow that ice line north again, and they're right back.
They just come back.
And last year, like I said, they just spent the whole winter here. They never left.
Yeah, and some of our own predictions by like 2050 is that birds will be staying here like 20-some more days. And by 2100, if we stay on the same trend, that mallards and black ducks will never have to leave the Great Lakes region. I mean, that's a huge amount of old big water and marsh and stuff around it that was going to potentially suck up a lot of birds. I don't want to cover all that stuff here with you, but these are the types of things we talk about all the time in the blind, right? And how do you set seasons that are favorable for everybody? So
so far, Ohio, we've stuck fairly consistent with our seasons in the last 15 or 20 years. We haven't been, chasing the birds and inching our seasons backwards too much. But at some point, that's going to start changing.
You guys are part of that in this episode, A Tale of Two Migrations, though, that I really get into, like, the fact that, like Long Point, you can almost shoot every single dabbling duck species in North America, minus like a cinnamon teal, on opening day, which is the third Saturday in September up there.
Yep.
And you guys are probably the same when you open here. And there hasn't been measurable weather. There hasn't been a lot of weather.
Nope.
But birds are moving out of like these breeding areas where they know they're not going to stay into really kind of these agricultural soil landscapes to take advantage of all the carbohydrate-rich foods that are there, so that when they need to make the next jump, they're fueled up, they're fat, and they're ready to go. So we will talk about, well, that'll lead us right into wetland management.
Yeah,
because, you know, what type of plants do you guys focus on growing here to kind of give the birds the nutrition they need to, you know, make that next jump, to survive, but also to attract ducks to shoot?
Yeah. Yeah, sure. Well, our marsh management philosophy here is, I don't know, I've talked about this with other people and on other podcasts, and I like to use the word holistic. You know, we're trying to provide year-round habitat for not just waterfowl, but for other breeding, you know, wetland birds and wetland-dependent species all year round. So we have 22 diked and managed impoundments, and every year, you know, it rotates around, and there's a different set of impoundments that are managed in a different way. But every year we're trying to provide year-round, like some deeper water hemi-marsh, some shallow water hemi-marsh. We try to provide shorebird habitat spring and fall when the shorebirds are coming through. And then of course we try to provide waterfowl habitat, in particular in the fall. So we have a set number, or a number of our units that we manage for moist soil in the summer, to provide some moist soil food for the waterfowl in the fall. We also intentionally manage for deeper water habitats and submerged aquatic vegetation for the widgeon and the gadwall, and so we can kind of try and take advantage of those species when they're migrating through here too in the fall. And then teal season, of course, we're always aiming for some shallow water, you know, mudflat type habitat for the teal.
So I think this is a key print. There's a couple key principles here. One is that no single wetland unit provides for every single animal, everywhere, you know, all the time, right? That it's treated like a complex, so that as you move or rotate around, and if you need to draw one down to revitalize it and get that plant community going again, to expose that mud flat, you know, that's not gonna be marsh bird habitat on that year. But then the other one over here, you're gonna leave water on that you wouldn't have. It starts growing cattail and swamp loosestrife, not purple loosestrife, but swamp loosestrife and other things that are beneficial to kind of the rails and other stuff. That's, you know, that seems kind of like the mentality in general that you're focusing on. So
Yep, for sure. That's kind of core to what we do here. And you know, there might be, or there probably is, some small trade-offs in the fall for waterfowl use in some cases, because we're providing habitat for other species at different different parts of the year. But that's part of what we're trying to do out here, is provide year-round habitat for all the wetland species that are here.
Yeah, and we talked a little bit about. So let me pause before I get on the next question, because I think that's super admirable, because a lot of folks would say, I just want to shoot ducks. But sometimes when they say I just want to shoot ducks, they're saying mallards. And we talked today when we were out in the marsh, and I was like, John, what do you think of mallards? And you know, there's a lot of people, I mean, it's king for a lot of folks, but then in the duck world, a lot of folks are like, mallards are boring, right? But they drive the conservation engine for ducks and duck hunting to a large degree. And you commented that, hey, I just love seeing mallards decoy. And I at heart know they're the most common duck, and we've studied them more than anything. But there's a reason for that, because they're big ducks, they decoy nice, they glide in. The shooting for them can be phenomenal. They eat great.
I was going to say,
right?
They taste good.
They taste good, yeah. They roast up nice on a grill. So, but also, if you just focused on mallards, yeah, you'd do okay, because they'll use all the marsh types, but you can really provide better habitat for widgeon and gadwall in some of these places where you keep submerged aquatic vegetation, things that they eat a little bit more of, right? And then also provide habitat for marsh birds and such, and then these mud flats for the teal that they like. So I think as a complex, it really works for for all birds, which is really cool.
Yep.
But you do have a lot of neighboring clubs and such that just straight up, we started talking about this today. As I said, we can, if any of this you feel is controversial, I can nix it out and, because it is. I mean, it depends on who you talk to. I think you and I talk about it frankly and very, what's the word I'm shooting for? Pragmatically, I guess, right? But there is a lot of flooded corn around you that a lot of other clubs do. And we talked about it in the sense of mostly, when it freezes, these birds have to leave anyway. So flooded corn only to some extent just feeds birds well while they're here. But if it got cold like it used to, they would just go anyway, and the flooded corn wouldn't matter. So what really matters is the changing climate to a large degree. But food-wise, what does it do on the landscape, and maybe how do you think it's like changed bird behavior?
Yeah, so it's at least over the time of my career here, it's definitely changed bird behavior. So around our club and in the general area, in this region, there's probably several thousand acres of flooded corn. There's no question, I have no hard feelings when it comes to flooded corn. There's no question that provides a lot of value for the ducks that are here, and especially for attracting and holding ducks into this region. There's no question that's providing a lot of value there.
I want to stop you for 1 second there, because there was a really nice piece in the Montezuma region, a half hour from my house, and I've got a bunch of folks. I don't have financial wherewithal to even get close to purchasing that, but it was about 400 acres. And I had a whole plan to put it in WRP, and I did the whole design and everything. And I was trying to pitch it to people because I wanted to be the next John Simpson, where we actually started a club out there, and some very, very well-to-do farmer bought it, and it's kind of off the books now. But in those 400, I myself, the intent was to rotate flooded corn in a quarter of it every single year, right? Just move it around, but then do all that other stuff so that prior to the corn being flooded or some of it being harvested or whatever, you had all these different other things, so you could shoot teal early and wood ducks and attract good numbers of pintails into small seeds, and basically provide for a nice diversity of foods and such, and different styles of hunting for folks. But the comment here is that no matter what, if I had the capacity to do it, I'd probably put in a little bit of flooded corn, because I've hunted in it in places. And you can certainly shoot ducks over it, right, at the right time. But I would never make it the major component of any system.
No. And some of our neighboring clubs have embraced that strategy too, where they have, their total acreage is in a mixture of flooded corn, moist soil, natural marsh, and they're hunting the diversity. And they do really well, and there's a lot of value in that from a strictly duck killing perspective, and there's a lot of value in flooded corn. What's happened here regionally in my 15 or 16 years that I've been here is that new clubs are popping up, and the clubs that are present are planting more corn in the continual arms race, right? It's a classic arms race, and it's a classic tragedy of the commons, because it's in every individual club's interest to have the most flooded corn that they can. But it's in the worst interest of the region to have so much flooded corn that the food overwhelms the number of birds that are here. And so what has happened in my career here, and I've seen it especially in the afternoon shooting, when I first started here, there was good afternoon hunting, because the ducks would have to leave in the late afternoon to start feeding, because it took them time to forage and get all the food that they wanted, during the evening. But what's happened now is there's so much flooded corn on the landscape that the ducks don't even have to fly until well after dark, and they can forage for a couple nights or a couple hours in a night in one of the flooded cornfields, and then back to wherever their safe haven is.
Just to like a day roost afterwards.
Yeah, and so we've allowed the ducks, or we've allowed them to become completely nocturnal, because they're not hungry at all and they don't have to move during the day.
And that's not just anecdotal. That's, Matt Palumbo's stuff.
Yeah.
He did a bunch of GPS backpacks on birds here to track movements.
We've demonstrated that with...
Matt was a grad student with me doing his PhD in Ontario, and then he's now actually the non-game bird biologist for the state of New York, which is really cool because he's a hardcore hunter, turkey hunter, deer hunter, duck hunter, and he's the non-game representative for the state, which is kind of neat to have somebody. That's not a really common thing that you see. So, but Matt put these GPS backpacks on birds and then actually tracked them and saw them leave like these transitions from flooded corn at night and then just go sit out in the bay or wherever else. I don't remember all the trends. Again, this is one like where I'm a author on the paper. I think you are too, and I don't remember all of it.
So you're spot on. What we demonstrated, what Matt and us, including you, what we demonstrated was that, a couple things. One was we demonstrated this nocturnal behavior where these ducks literally only moved during the closed nighttime periods that are closed to hunting. And that was their survival strategy for the fall, was to feed only at night and stay in the rest areas during the daytime. And so functionally, even though they're here and they're counted by aerial surveys, functionally they might as well not be here if you're a duck hunter. They're unavailable to you.
Yeah, they're unavailable.
The other interesting thing was, so a big chunk of our marked mallards, that was their survival strategy for the fall. The other thing that was really cool is there was a subset of birds that their survival strategy for the fall was to hunker down in emergent marshes and not fly. And so we had birds that were in some of our heaviest hunted natural marsh units all fall, and they literally did not fly. Well, they couldn't have flown. They just stayed in there, hunkered in the vegetation, and survived by doing that. Just staying under the radar, basically.
Yeah, it's kind of cool. It's like this, this is what I think makes waterfowl hunting kind of cool. Is it's always hard to, we don't, and I'll hit on this in another episode, but we don't tend to impact the populations as much as we think we do. It's this concept of compensatory mortality, and the ones that we're going to die just die by you're gone, and the ones that we're going to survive do things like hunker down and sit. There's places, guys in Missouri can tell you this, there'll be a refuge next to you on one of their conservation areas, and you can sit like almost right up against the berm on one side and shoot, and you can almost poke your head up and look, and the ducks are just on the other side. And by the time they've got to Missouri, they know where they're safe and where they're not.
For sure.
And I mean, those are important areas to make sure we got birds to fly back north. But it's interesting to know that they're hunkered right down in those hunted marshes. But we did talk about the density you hunt at too, and it's pretty.
Yeah, our density is pretty low.
Yeah.
But the popular spots where people are killing ducks, they get used daily almost. But then the third strategy that we saw in the fall was the ducks that liked to fly around and pretend that hunting season was not open, and those were the ones that didn't make it through the fall.
Yeah, I was wondering. I think I kind of burst your bubble by hinting at that one already. But you actually detected that in those birds.
No, we could pick those ducks out. In the first week or two of the season, you could, as the data came in, you could see the ducks that were still flying around during the daytime, and we knew that their days were numbered.
This ain't gonna work out,
and hardly any of them made it.
Right. That's interesting. Yeah. Well, this is like dissecting ducks through the years. I mean, you think every mallard that you grab is the same, but the reality is that when you actually, and even people who've cut them up, they're definitely all different beasts, right? Just like people, and ducks can tell themselves apart because of that, but also the behaviors are quite different among individuals, and you just don't. I don't think people think about how different each one of these animals is and how that leads to who survives and who doesn't, maybe.
Yeah.
But I don't know that we got into all the marsh stuff. I think we're going to have another chance to maybe do this in the future. I really appreciate you hanging out, having a couple beers. I'm sure over the years we'll have a few more before we finish our careers up. Couple things to end us, I think. So maybe like, out of all the time you've been here, as far as a weather event that sticks out in your head, that is kind of the most memorable that's happened here, either during hunting or non-hunting season, anything that you feel is like the most spectacular weather event you've seen at Winous?
Well, I mean, I've seen a couple pretty cool weather events. The one that really sticks in my mind is, and I hope I get the name right. I remember the year. It was 2010, and I think it was Hurricane Sandy that came through in 2010.
That would have been from like the East Coast, from like the Mid-Atlantic across into
Came up
out of the east, right?
From the southeast. I mean, that produced some incredible duck hunting weather here in terms of wind and you know, everything you look for in a really ducky day. Questionable day to be boating, but that produced some really good duck hunting weather here. And the other reason I remember it is because you know, we harvested a white-cheeked pintail here during that, or right after that storm.
Is that legal?
That was pushed up.
Did anybody question?
I don't know about that, but that's a good question.
We'll just go with yes
And,
until we edit this out, possibly.
we saw cinnamon teal, didn't harvest any, and it was just one of those cool events that, you know, just pushes birds way off course.
Yeah, birders go nuts for that stuff too, right? When those big weather events happen, you get all kinds of wonky shorebirds and other things that shouldn't be around.
For sure.
So that's cool. I'm sure you'll see more of the weather events here. This is one of the windiest places I've ever been. I think, you know, 9.5 out of 10 times I've been here, the wind's been blowing. Really want to thank you for being on. I hope this records well. I hope this goes well.
Yep.
This is fun to do. I hope it becomes a big part of the Foul Weather podcast. But any last comments on? Sorry for the pressure. Didn't really cut into this one well. You know, as far as because you work a lot with duck hunters and next generation of students. Just a general comment on, you know, how to be forward thinking going into the future about continuing the culture of duck hunting and duck research. Like what are like maybe 3 key steps you might think of?
So that's a great question, and I was thinking a little bit about this, and I hope you agree with my answer, or in part agree with my answer. I think it's really important that we continue duck hunting culture and continue to have like maybe respect's not maybe the right word, but an awareness of duck hunting culture as we move forward, just in the conservation field in general. To me, that doesn't mean that we necessarily need to recruit duck hunters and make duck hunters, and I'm not a big champion of the everyone has to be a hunter kind of mentality. But I think everyone needs to be aware of hunting and the roots and the value that it brings to conservation. And I think there's a lot of opportunity for hunters in this field and non-hunters in this field to work together to do a lot of great things in the future. And every once in a while I see a little bit of divisiveness there, and I think that's the wrong path. I think we need to have, be bringing those two things together. So a lot of opportunity for collaboration, I think, going forward.
Yeah, and I asked for 3 things, but I think that one nails them all together at once, actually, John. I mean, I always say this all the time. There's going to be things that I say on the podcast that are sound divisive. I've always been that person to bring up what I think are controversial topics. I've always been that person to make sure that the conservation public really understands the interworkings of things a little bit better. But at the end of the day, I've always thought that, you know, and this is true. We all sit at the same conservation table, and we can't be divided within us because there's too many people out there that just don't give a shit.
Yep.
You know, right? I don't care if you're a hunter or non-hunter, as long as you're at the table and you're part of the conversation. That's the most important part, because there's a lot of people out there that don't care about the environment, don't care about these resources. And, you know, bringing people together is really the most important part of this. So.
Yeah, for sure.
And I think you guys epitomize that at Winous Point. So, I mean, you've done tons of game work, you've done tons of non-game work. Your hunter conservationist members are supporters of both of those things. So kudos for what you do, and thanks for being on with us.
Great, thank you.
During this In the Marsh recording from last fall, I hunt with John Simpson at Winous Point Shooting Club
and we chat control of the invasive plant known as Phragmites or common reed. We work and shoot some early arriving gadwall and talk managing shooting pressure and changes in migration patterns of Lake Erie waterfowl. A thank you to John, Simpson, and Winous Point members for being conservation champions for us all.
We use the drone a lot. We used it a lot this summer for mapping Phragmites and invasive plant stands. That worked really well.
Yeah, you guys, what is it, the Phragmites working group or something, or what's it called?
Yeah, we have what's called the Lake Erie Cooperative Weed Management Association.
So it's not just frag; it's all other types of stuff too.
So it's a group of partners, local conservation partners, and a lot of the duck hunting clubs, the private marshes are involved too. We have a steering committee and a board that runs the whole thing. Just hired a coordinator this year for a 2-year term, so we're hoping that really kind of gives some permanency to the program.
Yeah. Do you think it's knocked back your frag? Because, I mean, other places, like you, Michigan, on southern Ontario around St. Clair probably have had more Phragmites issues than anywhere I've seen, but
it's made a huge difference in our Phragmites around here to the point that we pretty much put ourselves out of business because we controlled all the Phragmites to the point that there was nothing left for us to do, and the program kind of fizzled out for a few years.
Yeah.
Until the Phragmites grew back. We do other invasive species too, don't get me wrong, but it's really founded around Phragmites.
So, like in other places, in New York, like I think it's something like they can only get a permit to spray like 50 acres a year of frag.
Mm-hmm.
It's an anti-glyphosate kind of comment that I don't think is super well founded, but
Yep.
That's what you guys are, you're just using aquatically labeled glyphosate mostly?
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
Doing like a late summer, early fall application. Usually in the second half of September is when we spray here.
Yeah, that's late. We're more like late August usually because I think you guys are just a little warmer than us.
I think so.
Every single weather model I've ever run for this like kind of Northwest Ohio, you have like this warm blob over you that almost perfectly fits your Lake Plain hunting zone. So it kind of makes, your zone makes sense for sure. But yeah, I mean, we don't have any helicopter stuff. I would say we barely scratch the surface. And I think a lot of places that, they even do control frag, I think they think they're controlling it, but from what I've seen, it just keeps eking a little further and further, right?
Yeah.
It's a kind of a lot of these plants, I don't know, I always said just, you gotta, crack a few eggs to make an omelet. So you're gonna mess some stuff up in the process, but you gotta be aggressive with them on the front end. And I just don't know that a lot of people are enough, so.
Regionally here, so we've been doing the program for 15 years. Regionally here, we've done, I would say probably on average 1,000 acres a year. Some years was more, some years was less.
How many acres?
1,000 acres a year.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, with helicopter treatment.
That's insane. That's
the initial years was, a lot, and then we really knocked it back and we had a few years of zero. And now we're kind of in this maintenance mode where we're doing 300-ish acres every year. And I'm double counting, of course. That's some repeat applications. Over time
right.
there.
Because sometimes it takes more than one shot of it, right?
Yeah,
at a site.
yeah. But some of the stuff that we did in 2009, some of that stuff we did in the first year we did Phragmites control, we've only returned to it maybe once or twice in that 15-year span. So we're getting, 5 to 6 years of good control at times.
Yeah, I don't think it's nothing you can walk away. I have a, what Japanese knotweed is? It looks like bamboo.
Oh yeah, yep.
Este episodio es presentado por Honda. Descubra la nueva Honda Passport Trail Sport Todoterreno. La Passport más todoterreno que Honda haya imaginado jamás. Esta Passport cuenta con mayor altura al suelo, barras de techo en todas sus versiones y neumáticas especialmente diseñados para cualquier terreno. Además, disfruta todos tus viajes con el control de clima de 3 zonas, techo panorámico y opciones como asientos delanteros con calefacción y ventilación. Conoce más en honda.com/passport.
We moved into our place and we had like an acre of it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of, as you as you attack it, as you spray it, and we're doing glyphosate and 2,4-D combined on it.
Yep.
It wants to push out to the edges. So what I'm doing now is I first spray the edges so that the roots have herbicide in the edge, and then I hit the center. So when it tries to send energy out, it hits more herbicide, hopefully. But I don't think we could ever walk away from it. I really don't. I think that it's kind of always going to be there, and if a new landowner comes in, it's just going to take off. But what's really cool now is I've got it to a point where I can herbicide it in the fall, and I can throw down brassica seed.
Yep.
Like, what is it, Dwarf Essex brassica. Mm-hmm. And I've got a ground blind in it. And it used to be, a giant patch that was 9 feet tall.
Yep.
And so I at least have a space on the farm that's useful now. So, but again, if we just walked away from it, you can see it just wants to creep right back out.
So are you doing you're finding best results with a late summer, early fall application of herbicide on that?
It'll grow right through like an early one. It just pushes right through it.
Yeah.
My problem gets to be
Is teal up front, or are they shorebird? They're teal, aren't they?
They're teal, yeah. Blow a call at something here. They're gone.
Just the way they were flying, I thought they were yellow legs for a second.
Yeah, they almost look like shorebirds. I've been a little bad about getting that late spray on it. I also brush hog it, and then when it comes up and it's young stuff and trying to send energy down late-ish summer, I try to spray. It's the August, because those brassicas you got to put in by like mid-August-ish, maybe a little later, right? But not much around us. And so what I'm doing is spraying and then throwing the brassica down, and I'm almost getting, once I get it down to where it's only like ankle high coming up, I almost got 100% kill on some test plots last year.
Yep.
So my spray rig went down this year. I blew a tire and I never found time to get the sprayer, because it's, I can hand do it with a wand, but mostly we're doing it behind an ATV. So
we've got 2 little patches of it on our property here, just like really small patches, and so I've been early detection, rapid response on them.
Right.
And the one patch I was able to eliminate fairly easily, and I'm fairly confident it's gone. But the other patch, and I mean it's small, but I hit it every year. I hit it with some kind of herbicide, and it just keeps coming back.
Yeah. And people are like, oh, just cover it with black plastic or dig the roots. And I'm like, you fucking cover it with black plastic or dig the roots. The anti-herbicide people kill me. They really, it's just the total lack of any thought of practicality and how big your problem is. And, there are folks that have postage stamps for houses. And yeah, I get that comment all the time. There's a paper, it was like, what glyphosate kills bumblebees, right? And I'm like, and when you read the paper, it's not anything about the chemical itself or feeding on plants. It's that when you spray it on them, it mats, because they breathe through their exoskeleton.
Yep.
It mats their hairs down and they can't breathe and they suffocate.
Oh, I see.
But how many bumblebees do we actually directly spray
onto?
With, like, if you're like down south, they actually spray. So they top kill soybeans, right? They actually hit them with glyphosate to shut them down. Well, beans aren't even.
These high rate.
You got stuff? Okay. Right here. Yep. Oh, you want to clean them up? You want me to clean them up?
Yep. I don't have a shot.
That one's dead.
Yeah, it is.
Well, shit, did I kill that one? I didn't even see those. I was looking at the other ones, John.
They were gadwall.
Yeah. They come out of nowhere. Yeah, you're good, I think, on that one.
There's two more ducks.
You got 2 coming? Yeah.
Nope, they're
not happening. Go pick those.
Are these ducks out front though? These 4 or 5? Or are they?
Yeah. All right, maybe stuff's starting to finally move. Just watch your bird over there if she don't
Yeah.
get away.
No, they're good. They're not going anywhere.
I'm okay with pulling 3 out of 4. You see me? I had to like walk around the corner.
I know.
I'm like, I can't shoot. They're yours.
And I knocked 2 down. I didn't kill them cleanly.
Single
but
front.
this one's all yours.
Is it coming? Oh
Yeah,
shit.
right there.
I got her. It's a gadwall day. Funny how fast it happens sometimes.
Be nice right now.
We did that on opening day. We didn't have 5 birds at 8:30. It's like 30 minutes later we were done.
These gadwall decoyed in like unusually well.
Too close to you, honestly.
Yeah.
You must have the drakes because I got the hens.
I got one of each.
One each.
I was surprised. They were right there. I was surprised I didn't kill either one of these cleanly. I'm glad you finished them up because I was fumbling around trying to get some shells in my gun.
Well, that's what I thought of. I was like, John's just shooting a 20 gauge side by side. I better shoot these.
Yep.
But I wanted to ask, you know. They weren't going anywhere.
No.
Those silos are a pretty cool backdrop. Are they abandoned?
They are.
Or is that part of the farm?
That's part of the farm that we bought. So there was a farmhouse and a couple big barns and all sorts of stuff. We've taken most of that down. This is, yeah, like I was saying, this is the 11th year since we finished the restoration on this. It's pretty nice. It was like one of the first big projects of my career. It was cool to show up here and have this whole 400-acre farm to play with.
Yeah, it's a nice clean slate to start with.
Yeah. So we designed the whole restoration in conjunction with the NRCS staff. And then here's a wood duck coming on the low right.
You said it's like a 200-acre field, or was? Oh my
I
God.
didn't want to shoot over that way.
You're fine, John. John. I'll deal with it. Got a little bloody duck here on my hand. I like them to come home clean, but they seem to never want to do that for me. I muck them up, the dog mucks them up.
Yeah.
Another bird you throw on top gets them bloody, but hey, they all eat at the end of the day. It's a lot of pressure, though, showing up here as the new executive director and having to, you know, do the full-blown restoration on a piece, though, and be like, all right, I'm not going to screw this up.
It was a big project to walk into, but it was great. So yeah, the diked unit we're standing in is about 200 acres. It was all soybeans when we purchased the property. And there's almost another 200 acres in the other 3 smaller diked units here. And about half of that was being farmed and the other half was already wetland.
So pull drain tile, basically just reverse engineer it to keep water in it, and
pretty much, yeah.
Was there tile? There must have been drain tile in it to get the water off the field.
It was ditched, and there was 3 different phases of drain tile that had been run through it. So old clay tiles, all the way up to modern plastic tiles.
Huh.
So breaking all those, basically reinforcing or rebuilding a lot of the dikes on the inside so that they could hold water on the inside.
Yeah.
You know, tapering them out and shoring them up better, reseeding them. And then we just opened the culverts, and over half the property flooded just with gravity, with natural lake level. That's
neat.
how far below the lake level it was sitting.
Yeah. You guys, it's so cool to be next to Lake Erie here, to have, I mean, just the abundance of water that other people don't, right? Like,
yeah.
We just got done doing that DU podcast with Mike Brazier and talking about how dry it is, and, you know, people that can pump or gravity feed water, fine, but that's not a lot of folks in like the Mississippi Valley there, right?
No,
so
water is typically not an issue here. We spend a lot of time trying to get rid of water more than we try to bring it in.
Well, and your lake levels came way up. They're dropping again, right?
Yeah, they're on their way back down. They're still, I think they're still above the long-term average, but they're certainly down from the record levels of the last couple of years.
That reset the marshes, though. I mean, I remember folks dredging at Long Point. You've probably read that one paper we did on inverts and birds and stuff from dredging up there. And then, you know, my wife and I went back and tried to hunt in the spots I used to go to. I mean, I couldn't even, you needed a boat. You couldn't walk into them anymore.
Yeah, it's
so
amazing.
it was almost too much, for sure.
It's amazing how much it changes.
Yeah. And that's just like, how you must follow it obviously from upstream down, but that's from mostly snowmelt coming through like Lake Superior and Huron and stuff. But it's kind of hard to predict years out, isn't it?
Yep. It is. And if you really look, I mean, I haven't looked at the models themselves. Oh, cormorants. I haven't looked at the models themselves, but if you just look at the long-term predictions, basically it seems like they're always predicting that it's going to return to the long-term average. So the models aren't extremely helpful.
No. I think that's another, cormorants don't glide like that. Is that a duck? No?
Straight out?
Straight out?
I think it's a cormorant. Yep.
My God, when they cup up, they almost, I mean, it's just me not having as many cormorants around as you guys.
We're seeing a lot of them today, that's for sure.
Yeah, yeah.
So we don't, there is summertime breeding season cormorants around here, but we get these big migratory groups. Usually in September. This year they're here in October.
Where are they coming out of? Are they lakes further up in Canada?
I have no idea where they're coming out of.
Are they coming out of the northwest? I mean, that cold front's coming through now. This could be pushing some out of the other, further up the Great Lakes. Like Georgian Bay must have them.
Yeah, it's
places like that.
That's what I'm guessing. It's got to be the upper Great Lakes birds just moving and concentrating here this time.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's mostly snow melt. That's the biggest thing, is huge snows that all melt and then dump into the lakes, I'm thinking, and then that's, you know, back to the water level stuff. But that's really the main driver of it. And so Lake Erie's not controlled. Like Lake Ontario has the Moses Saunders Dam on it, and that's a huge controversial thing.
Yeah.
For us on Lake Ontario. But Erie's just all, there's nothing. Is there anything upstream that's dammed at all? Nothing, right?
No.
No.
No, the Detroit River Channel, they actually dredge that once in a while, which increases our inflows.
Yeah, yeah.
Cormorants moving.
Hey, we didn't get skunked, which is pretty rare here, isn't it, John?
Yeah.
I mean, you guys spread your pressure around well and stuff.
We spread our pressure around well. You know, we're blessed with a large area and a limited number of guns going through it.
Right.
But we still have to really manage our harvest, or manage our shooting pressure, I guess I should say. Because that really drives the bird behavior. Bird movements around here is mostly driven by pressure.
Right.
There's so much super abundant food between us and all the other clubs that food almost isn't a factor in waterfowl movements around here anymore. It's all driven by shooting pressure and disturbance. So we still spend a lot of time managing our pressure.
Blackbirds keep sounding like teal once in a while on me, zipping by.
The redwings behind us are singing like it's springtime.
Yeah. Well, we're still 60 degrees. You're going to drop this week though, so it's good.
It'll cool down.
I'm looking forward to it. I mean, I'm looking forward to it more for rut to start getting going than duck hunting.
That's what I'm ready for.
Yeah.
That's what I'm ready for.
So quick question for you though, and I was going to cover this in the main interview, and if this works out, I might be able to use it too. And
Sure.
if you don't want to talk too much corn, we don't have to. It's a controversial topic, right?
Yeah.
Among folks across the board, but a lot of you guys grow amazing moist soil and emergent marsh stuff here, and the ducks obviously need that nutrition. But there's, I don't know, thousands of acres of flooded corn around here?
Yeah, several thousand acres of flooded corn on the properties surrounding us.
So one of the things I always say, and this is, years ago I ran maybe you saw it, a YouTube channel. It was 2-3 years ago, and I did one episode called The Corn Episode, and it's got now over like 1,500 views because I think it's a good topic, right? But the comment from folks down south is the reason they don't see ducks anymore is just because, everybody's planting corn up north and they've got bubblers. But I've always said that it doesn't matter, because if it gets cold and freezes like it used to, those ducks, it doesn't matter how much food you give them, they've got to go somewhere, probably further south, right?
Yep.
Listen to these cormorants. They sound like ducks going by. Is that kind of your sense here? I mean, when it freezes here, for the most part, you just lose your ducks no matter how much food you've got? Yeah. Or is there anything that still keeps them here even with that?
No,
right?
it's a little species specific. The end of the season kind of comes in 2 phases for us. So the first big freeze that makes like ice you can walk on and puts ice across Muddy Creek Bay, which is our rest area. That big freeze moves out pretty much all of the odd ducks. Widgeon, pintail, gadwall, most of the teals.
Bird. Oh, you shit! That's on me. That's on me.
He flared right at the last second.
No. I picked up too early. It wasn't close enough. That's on me.
For a second there, I thought he was going to turn back.
No, that's how it goes. Sometimes you fuck it up. All right, continue your story.
Yeah,
so you can shoot another duck.
the first hard freeze of the year, that moves out all of our odd birds. Widgeon, pintail, teal, gadwall, they're pretty much gone. They don't come back. And sometimes that happens around Thanksgiving, late November, early December. But the mallards and black ducks, and I think it comes back to this sort of regional, local population of Great Lakes mallards, they only push as far south as the ice line. So they'll go to southern Ohio, to the big rivers, maybe Kentucky, Tennessee. And then lots of years they'll bounce right back if it thaws back out, and we've seen that a lot. So those ducks, long story short, those ducks, I think they only get pushed really far south when we get some real heavy winter conditions, and that just hasn't been happening, in the last 10 to 15 years, 10 years.
Yeah, it's because like this thing that's coming through now, it's going to get cold, but my sense, I mean, I cannot believe in this, strong El Nino you're going to have that's not going to just bounce back warm again, and that might lead to, birds doing that bouncing back and forth thing. But that's only your Great Lakes, your local mallards, you're kind of in the eastern ones that come in from Ontario and Quebec.
Yep.
That's not your, I don't know, we can talk about this a little bit too, but I don't think those are your wild mallards that have, some real drive to go to their ancestral grounds.
Sure.
I hinted at this earlier on the podcast, and I think that, these, and we tested genetically birds you have here, and we're still releasing a lot of game farm mallards on the East Coast, and those birds have no ancestral drive to go south, right? And so you're starting to get those genes here, and that might be affecting that movement south. I wonder if that's not like when people say, hey, the duck migration's changed, and when they say ducks, they mean mallards. The weather's changed, but I think that genetic makeup of that population might be it. I mean, the Arkansas big woods, because they take care of, their resource, like the White River and that stuff, is just still an awesome place. Those birds just show up no matter the weather, I think. They're just they just have a pile of really solid wild mallards that just come to those big woods still.
Yeah, and the genetic work that we've done here, I mean, you were involved in that. This area of the country is a real mixing pot for mallards. Yeah. We've got a wild mix of genes from all sorts of different flyways that come through here.
Nah, they're not worth blowing a duck call at, I don't think.
No.
This one out front might be, though. That's a cormorant.
Mm-hmm.
Damn it.
Thought maybe you saw something.
As my wife always says, good job, duck biologist.
Yep.
Yeah, what is it? It's like 60% of your birds had some level of contamination from, game farmy stuff, I think.
Yeah,
is what
exactly.
It was
around 60% had some amount of game farm domestic genes in them.
But it had increased from like 40% from like even 10, 20 years ago, I think.
Yep.
I should know this stuff. I mean, I wrote the paper, but.
and then later, as time progresses on through the fall, we got more and more wild birds that were moving in, assuming from places further away to the north and the west. But our band recovery data here kind of supports that too. Early on, we're recovering a lot of Great Lakes mallards, and then later in the season and at different times of year, we're bringing more western birds that come through here. But we get a real mix of birds here, west, east, and local Great Lakes birds in terms of mallards.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm not going to do all the spoiler here because I think I'm going to probably have Phil Lavretsky on and do a full, podcast. We'll do a full podcast and on, mallard genetics. But, the real concern is that where the epicenter of these releases kind of mid-Atlantic and such is where in northeast U.S. is where mallard populations really plummeted first. Mm-hmm. But then like Great Lakes populations Michigan was down like 75% from long-term average this year, I think.
Yep.
Which is insane. And it seems to be on the leading edge of that hybrid line where those game farm genes are moving, that populations are declining. So as I've said to folks, I think we really need to get this one right and spend a lot of time on it and take it seriously. If it is the smoking gun, fine. If it's not, we also need to find that out for all the folks that have businesses that surround game farm mallards and such.
Well,
and
that's true.
I'm just worried, John, mostly like if this stuff hits the prairies, I mean, eastern waterfowl I tout is important, but if you start buggering up the mid-continent mallard population, that gives me and everybody in this duck world serious heartburn, right? For sure. But I also have to wonder the landscape and the habitat in the West being not so urbanized, or basically hardly urbanized at all compared to here. I almost wonder how well those genes can persist out there. Yeah,
It might not be the habitat that, the urban habitat that those genes can survive in, so maybe that's a good thing.
Yeah, that's a really good comment, I think, because that recent paper that actually Phil Lavretsky and I put out with, folks from Europe and everywhere, it's like one of the biggest samples of genetics of mallards ever worldwide. It's I think there's over like 4,000 birds in that sample. I can't remember what it is. Let's say somewhere between 2,000 and 4,000. I mean, it's a big sample. And I don't fully understand all the stuff his graduate student did with it, but what the result really was that it seemed that these kind of game farmy genes were very much focused in these urban areas, and they might not push into the prairies. That might be what kind of holds stuff back.
Yeah,
so
there could be a habitat barrier there. Hopefully there is.
Yeah, but this leads me. I'm going to talk about this whole thing now, but I think we can repeat these things on the podcast too, because I think it's really interesting stuff. One of the thoughts there that I've talked about with Phil and others is that, the black duck disappeared probably because the black duck just doesn't tolerate people as much. I got a new grad student working on Long Island, and she put GPS backpacks on mallards and black ducks to compare use. And these are real preliminary results, but she's finding that mallards are selecting for more urban habitats where black ducks are avoiding them. And we're literally catching and marking these birds side by side with each other. And mallards are using cornfields and agricultural fields more than black ducks. So they seem to be doing things slightly differently, even though they live kind of in the same space, right?
Yep.
But black ducks couldn't make it. I think a lot of that's disturbance, urbanization, landscape change. But maybe by mistake, we actually placed this hybrid, game farm, and then it breeds with a wild mallard, and then you end up in a thing called a hybrid swarm, where hybrids just breed with hybrids. And maybe we actually made a duck by complete mistake that can live in that, ultra urbanized habitat of the East Coast and up through the Great Lakes that no other duck can live in. Maybe
that's true.
I mean, to me, it's a mistake, but or unintentional, and I wouldn't even say mistake, an unintentional actual benefit, I think, possibly, to have some of these urban mallards around.
That's a good point. The wild mallards of the East Coast that were there, they may have gone the way of the black duck, and we just didn't realize it.
Yeah, about the same time, it's possible. Well, and this is like, the link, like the Carolinas used to shoot mallards all the time, and now they just release mallards, so they have them. And that was Greg Soulier years ago. He came and gave a talk at the, what was it? It was like a Great Lakes waterfall wetlands thing that Scott Petrie put together. Scott was with Long Point Waterfall there, and now he's with Delta Waterfall. But he organized that, and Greg Soulier with the Upper Miss Great Lakes Joint Venture came and gave a talk, and talked about the connectivity of Great Lakes mallards and Great Lakes ducks to the kind of South Atlantic coast. And about the time their mallard migration stopped to that part of the world is when the game farmy genes started showing up in the Great Lakes region. So those two things might be linked too, right? A lot of changes for sure.
Well, there's no question there's some big landscape level changes going on with mallard populations here in the Great Lakes and across the continent, or at least across the eastern half of the continent.